will provide a PDF file in the comments.
Near-death experiencing and relations. The external stimulus of anthropomorphic associations and near-death experiences, evident of involvement psychologically of the dream state, the neuronic and synaptic involvement, the senses, the cognition, and the memorability. I think there is not consciousness really, that such has been an incorrect idiom and ideology prelude as a conventional consensus among peers, acclimated over duration, especially of the science curriculums, hence the subcategory of a sub within. I think it's the incorrect yet informative prevalence of the practical appliance and intention to achieving greater understanding, albeit a polarized indifference. I therefore structure a conclusive hypothesis of the occurrence of dreaming, evident of involvement of a divinity and sanctity with intention to motivating epiphanies and enlightenment of the intellect, senses, memory, and cognition. However, the impotence of selfish greed and arrogant morbidity of unscrupulous individuals venturing, psychotic adhering to rapturous contortions and distortions, prominent of such handicapped labels as branding, associations, as residual instillment of confirmation. Hence, their wicked folly of injustice and residual impact of foreboding sinister intentions, whatever the circumstances of violent states of aggression. Therefore, it is evident to me of a templated graphing bionically upon the neuronic synapses as sensory distilling, especially to do of a sensitization, animated reinforcement of pseudoscience ideology, and highlighted of dianetic abrasion. What would be explanation for why there is a proliferation of adverse to actual possession, to extents of soft to hard modes, dependent upon the severity of exposure, and distilling of such bionic animation of doppelganger impact of migrating, harvesting, external of the victimized corporeal organics. The attempt of handicapping and dociling brains neurally and the circumventing the individuality performed as a disassociation and disorderly dysfunction with command and delusion would clearly be mired as a external thought suggestion and a folie à deux impressionability, the delusion of two or more, and a gestated psychogenic neurogenic abrasion, especially combined of dreamscape biohacking implementation as vulnerability programming. The obvious substandards of hierarchy and an archetype of dominance would be a evident trajectory that is expedited as a malicious molecular diffusion and thus a myriad of osmosis, combined of such nanoscalar and nanogel efflux and efficacy. Such megalomanic elements performed as God syndrome, denial via belief syndrome, and thus a Stockholm syndrome, would be a common vector of the intent to perverting the natural elect and sanctity of corporeal organic lifeforms experiencing memories and sensory ways of functionality as a manufactured bioengineering, a regression of memory prevalence and a persecutory emphasis is thus a imposure of severely animated bionic filtrations, thought form and mnemonic programming, and a emphasis of transfusion of pestilence due to the biomass harvesting and body snatching, organ harvesting and blood transfusions, implantation and supplantation that has been going on, as if a confusion of whose body to being whose, then after. A persecutory argument ensuing as a amalgamation and even a confusion of language of species. See Genesis chapter 11 verse 7. And hence a pattern programming proliferated as a filtered process of confused states. I therefore have concluded with foundation for further discovery that near-death experiences are evident of the anthropomorphism associated of external and internal stimulus and influences, and the internal involvement with the corporeal biological experience, the sensory expansion of stimulants of the environment, the distilling of the continuance of the matriation of experience, and the ether beyond, inclusive and immediate involvements to the individual, to being perturbed and neglected and automated as a manual confliction by such usurper threats. I think the malicious matriation of continuance is evident of nefarious and unscrupulous narcissistic Megalomania conducted his biohacking integrations technologically. A absorption stratagem of conniving sacrilege, desecration and devastation, elicited as degradation performed deliberately as a infestation, via slow, methodical but expedient transfusion, and a fixation against the neurology for purpose, intent of antagonism and possessive matriation, via bioplasma and biometric and geometric exogenous to endogenous meta mapping, and pervasive hybridization as derivatives of electrolyte and fiber optic abrasion, as caustic corruption and corrosion synthesized as a temporal efflux, combined of a behavioral manic insanity externally as persecutory distilling and external appendage extended against the legitimate individual as extensions and exotic fermentations. Hence the circumstantial evidence of cognitive decline and degradation against the individual of corporeal organic bodies, and a pseudonym character assassination primarily via memory lapse and aggressive techniques closely tied to suggestive parameters of psychological command, and thus acclimatized, stenciled and tracing subliminal as efficacy contortions, committed over duration and pressured as a possessive graft intention and detachment threat, easily evident of such idiom of devourment and exsumption techniques, as filtering of cell division and cell renewal processing brought under immediate question as a maturation of bionic neuroprogramming parameters set as technological pseudoscience idioms, especially as dialectic cognitive therapy and cognitive behavioral dissociative distilling as psychological electronic warfare cybernetically, with fixated intention against the sanctity of life itself and the divinity of cohesions, unities and ambitions of matters of being. For our ascension, ways, purposes and transcendence of enlightenment is of such vastness of equities that such is the irrefutable promise that all strive to uphold the integrities of origin we all rely upon innately. And all that we do to do, such is our caring and grace of everything we do. Thus education clearly the ambitions of our learnings and accumulative earnings. For our repertoires are self-evident of mighty potentials and unwavering fortitudes that near-death experiences are of subtle confirmation to the novice and unfamiliar, that we transcend this place we call home naturally. Such mighty wisdom is this then, priceless treasure, in fact, so share it. For the accruance of interest is clearly the ambitions of intellect that surpasses any dianoetic access or economies of material valuations. For we enrich the self and each other with our sharing, mutualities and maturities of unconquerable vigor. I like to say, strengths of strengths, stronger than strength itself we are, together. Might of bastions of such graces, for we are warriors of old born and young old. Such our ascendancy of excellence, we are mighty life, that all respect our forts of Vations.